We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
Politics is the art of measurement, figuring out how much you can offer to one group compared to how it impacts the other. It's a delicate dance and can be upset by even the slightest of rumbles. But what happens when both sides of the political divide face earthquakes in the same week? Welcome to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. On today's show, we're going to examine the issues surrounding both major political parties and how it impacts them in the run-up to the 2024 election. I'd like to say a special hello to our listeners out on KNTR 106.3 FM of Lake Havasu City, Arizona. Thanks for being here. And remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com, where you can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer delivered what he suspects will be a death blow to President Biden, his agenda, and his 2024 hopes on Wednesday when he detailed what appears to be a number of shell companies funneling money back to the Biden family. Now, the White House is poo-pooing allegations already, but does Mr. Comer have, as Alex Jones is wont to say, the documents? Well, we're fortunate to be joined by a longtime host of this here radio show and Liberty Nation's senior political analyst, Mr. Tim Donner, to go through the details. Thanks for being here, Tim.
Always a pleasure, Mark.
So, Tim, I guess the most important question has to be, in your opinion, based on what Mr. Comer presented, does he have proof that the Biden family is involved in funneling and hiding money for pay-to-play schemes?
Well, what was interesting was that the White House preemptively announced that the charges were A, evidence-free, and B, politically motivated. Imagine that, Mark. To the first question, they said evidence-free, and then James Comer takes the podium and presents literally mountains of evidence with much more to come. Specific transfers, bank account records, 16 to 17 different shell companies used with banks all over the world for no prescribed purpose. As Byron Donald, the rather impressive up-and-coming young black Republican congressman from Florida, said, Donald Trump had a legitimate business in the Trump organization, but he had basically the one company. Whereas Joe Biden had 16 or 17 shell companies that were created for, at this point, it looks like no reason other than to what many people will call launder money. Okay, so sure sounds to me like they got the goods on him. Mark, I think it's a question of whether elite media, whether progressive media can really ignore something of this magnitude when they have so much evidence, all of which was spawned by the Hunter Biden laptop. But as they made clear today, this is not about Hunter Biden. No one cares if he was a drug-addicted derelict. Doesn't matter to the national conversation. What it does matter is what his laptop revealed about the Biden family, which now we've discovered has so many additional tentacles extending to grandchildren who benefited from these financial arrangements. In the end, I think, Mark, it's a question of, were laws broken? And if so, what were they? Or was this sort of a less specific, generalized corruption known as influence peddling, which is an age-old tradition in Washington? I mean, influence peddling is the mother's milk of many politicians.
Yeah, I'm reminded of the anointment of Pope Alexander VI, known as the Borgia Pope, with all the simony taking
Oh, sure, that
place.
Immediately came to mind.
It's just where my mind goes on it.
Yes.
But all the favor trading, the benefices, I believe they're called, that were doled out.
I think the Catholic Church called it indulgences.
Indulgences, yeah, that's the presidential indulgences.
It says Joe Biden is a Catholic, albeit a pro-choice Catholic, which is a contradiction in terms. These were certainly exactly the kind of thing that caused the Protestant church to break away from the Catholic Church, but I digress.
So let's talk about these companies. I think it's pretty interesting. So essentially, Mr. Comer listed a range of LLC. So this is limited liability companies. Although I think maybe in America it's limiting liability companies.
It's limited.
Oh, it is limited.
Limited
Okay,
liability, yes.
so what appears to be the case, and we don't know for sure, we don't have the documents, as it were, but what it appears to be is that they're all set up with no specific purpose other than to A, to receive a payment, and B, to send a payment on.
Right.
And what that does, that obfuscates the money trail. Now, as
That's
you
what
point
you
out,
call, that's why
yeah.
they call it a shell company.
Mm.
And you can think of the image of the shells in a game of three-card Monte, where the money's being hidden
find the
under
lady.
one shell, find the money.
Yeah. Yeah. So unless Joe Biden and his family, I believe it's 9 family members who appear to have directly benefited from payments here, unless you can show why these people were involved with these companies, including his grandchildren, who are all quite young.
I mean, we have to untangle the full mess. And that's one of the problems. It's so complicated that you have to find a way, if you're Republicans, to boil it down to a couple of simple talking points.
That really is the key thing, right? She talked earlier about will the media cover it. Now, it's notable that only places like Fox News and Washington Examiner, a place like this, ran the actual live thing, whereas the notorious Alphabet left-leaning news sites didn't really give it any coverage at all. They certainly didn't show the press conference.
Well, I think what they're going to do is what they've done since Republicans took over the House, which is their story is not going to be the actual allegations in the investigation. Their story is going to be the Democrats hit back, the Democrats' response, the Democrats calling it politically motivated, et cetera, et cetera. That's how they can say they've covered the story without really covering it.
Yeah, as you point out, it's such a difficult concept to put into a couple of tiny sound bites. So even if the Republicans do have the goods, how are they going to present that to the voting public, which is really quite clearly what they want to do, right? It's not about justice for all. They may say that, but what they want is Joe Biden gone, Democrats out of power, right? How are they going to present this in a way that will impact Joe Biden prior to the election?
Well, Mark, I will say this at a minimum. What this does is it drains Joe Biden of any presumed moral authority. This man who's talked about saving the soul of America can hardly make those claims. If he tries to attack Trump on the basis of morality, assuming Trump's a nominee, or DeSantis, whoever it is, he doesn't have any longer after this the moral authority to stand, on the high ground and claim that Donald Trump is so corrupt. Because if he brings up the moral issue, then he's going to become immediately vulnerable. And if he doesn't bring it up, then he's missing a major element of how we might be able to scare the American people about putting Trump back in power.
Well, I'm sure there'll be a letter from 51 of the nation's top accountants explaining how everything that Joe Biden did was perfectly above board. Now,
I think that's a satire waiting to be written, Mark.
Yeah, Graham Noble, Mr. Graham J. Noble on LibertyNation.com. Check it out. So we will be back with Mr. Tim Donner right after this short break discussing the state of the 2024 field. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides. Entertaining, informative, and just plain fun. Watch Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5. Produced by conservatives for conservatives. C5's The Left Free Zone. Hosted by Liberty Nation's Lisa K. Donner. Joined by a raucous, irreverent panel of authors. Deconstructing leftist narratives. Debating the hot topics. And remembering to laugh. Join the official conservative safe
You only
space.
did that to piss Jeff off.
Liberty Nation's The Conservative 5.